In this video, we're going to be talking about piriformis syndrome, what people typically do, why it's not the most effective strategies or exercises to use, and what it really is, and two of the most common things that I commonly see in the pelvis that relate to piriformis syndrome, and two exercises that we can use to overcome them. So traditionally with piriformis syndrome, a lot of people use these stretches to really start to stretch the back of their hip. They're bringing their legs up, they're trying to do pigeon stretches, just anything to open up the back of the hip. And although that gives some temporary relief, that's not usually the thing that's going to stick. It's not really going to be the most effective thing long term. You could be doing these every day and they may feel good, but we need to do things in order to hold on to that position. And so the reason why they do these exercises and the reason why they're prescribed is because at 90-ish degrees of hip flexion, the piriformis actually goes into a lengthened position, and so it helps as an internal rotator of the hip. And when you internally rotate the hip, essentially what happens is the sit bone area and the sacrum, which the piriformis is attached to, actually spreads and opens. Now this is great because again, it's reinforcing the position that we're looking for when it comes to piriformis syndrome, but it's not going to hold into place. You're not teaching your body actually how to get into the position, how to control it. That's what we'll be talking about a little bit later. When it comes to piriformis syndrome, there are two main strategies that I see at the pelvis that contribute to it. The first is the pelvis is dumping forward. And so when the pelvis dumps forward, think like your center of gravity is moving towards your toes, your back is arching, okay? And when you're shifting towards your toes, you need something in order to hold you back. Otherwise, you're gonna fall on your face. And so what happens is the muscles in the back of the pelvis, piriformis being one of them, they actually squeeze the sacrum. They actually push the sacrum and tuck the tailbone underneath. And what that will do is that is going to bring the sit bone and sacrum towards each other. Just like I mentioned, what we really want to do is to open up the space, but it's going to bring those two structures towards each other, thereby putting tension along those areas. Now, a main thing to think about is that the sciatic nerve actually travels underneath this little space here. It's called your sciatic notch. Now, when we start to close the back of the pelvis, we can sometimes put pressure on that nerve, which is why sometimes you feel nerve pain or tension going down your leg. Maybe you feel like a nervy sensation in your glute, and that's why they usually blame the piriformis for this. However, there are many different things to consider. So if the pelvis is dumping forward, I'm then going to get this lower pelvis to start to squeeze, and the piriformis is going to be one of those structures that are going to do that. So the main thing that we need to be thinking about doing is first bringing the pelvis back in space in order to reduce tension in the back of the pelvis. So for this exercise, we are going to do a hook lying reach with the kettlebell. By putting your feet on top of something like this is naturally going to roll the pelvis back. And that's kind of what we're looking for, because as we mentioned, the pelvis is dumping forward. We are then going to tighten up the back part of the pelvis in order to essentially pull us back. So what we're going to do is we're going to put our feet on top of something that's a little bit elevated, okay? And when I do this, I'm going to naturally feel the upper part of my pelvis, basically the tag of the pants, to be in contact with the ground. And that's the main thing that we want to think about. We want to think that the tag of the pants is in contact with the ground, because that's going to loosen up the lower part of the pelvis, essentially where that piriformis is attaching. By having my knees at hip width apart, that's going to promote that internal rotation of the pelvis, which again is going to open up the back part of the pelvis. By grabbing onto a kettlebell and reaching it up towards the ceiling, what that is going to do is it's going to push my lower ribs into the ground, which again is just going to stack the rib cage over the pelvis, something that is going to be very important in order to make sure that we're getting that internal rotation of the pelvis and that we're opening up the lower part of the pelvis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push the inside edges of my feet into the pad. When I do that, I'm going to feel my hips tuck under a little bit. I don't want you to actively tuck under. I just want you to feel that the pressure of your feet is going to influence your pelvic position. In this position, you're going to start to feel your hamstrings working. If you feel like your calves are working in this position, then what's happening is your feet are too far away. So I want you to just bring your feet into a position that you can get your whole foot on the pad, but when you press down, you just feel your hamstrings working, because those hamstrings are going to work to pull the pelvis underneath and reduce tension in the bottom part of the pelvis. So I'm going to reach the dumbbell or kettlebell up towards the ceiling. I'm pressing the inside edges of my feet on the ground. I'm going to take a big breath in through my nose as I reach the kettlebell up. As I breathe out, I'm just going to press my feet into the pad a little bit harder. Now, if you feel that piriformis kicking on, you feel the lower part of the pelvis kicking on, then what I want you to think about doing is when you breathe out, instead of pressing your feet, think more about reaching your knees forward. So think like my knees are going to be reaching forward as though my hand is pushing the femur into the socket. I'm trying to push my hand away. And then what that's going to do is going to get the hamstrings kicking on more, and it's going to reduce tension in the lower glutes and the piriformis area. So I'm going to inhale as I reach the kettlebell up. As I exhale, I'm going to press my feet or I'm going to reach my knees, but I'm not going to let the kettlebell come down. I'm going to keep it reaching the whole time. The second thing I commonly see when it comes to piriformis syndrome is potentially a pelvis that is turning away from one side. So let's just say you feel tension in that left lower part of your pelvis, that left piriformis. What happens is the pelvis is turning towards the right. Pelvis is turning towards the right. So what happens is this sacrum actually gets closer to this left sit bone. So the left sacrum gets towards the left sit bone. So I have a rotation away from the left. So sometimes what you'll see in this case, you'll see a right hip hike. Maybe you'll see more limited motion on that left side, limited hip flexion, limited straight leg raise. All these assessment measurements on the left side will be a little more limited because I have a pelvis that is turning towards the right. And so what we want to think about doing is teaching the pelvis and the body how to shift towards the left side. And in order to do that, again, we need to rely on that internal rotation. So it's not just a stretch, but it's teaching the pelvis how to dynamically move towards the left so that I can turn my body towards the left, open up the space between the sacrum and the sit bone. So in order to teach the pelvis how to turn towards the left side, we're going to use a couple things. First, we're going to use a wall, and we're going to use an ab mat. Now, even though you don't have an ab mat, this could be a rolled up towel. This could be anything that is just going to side bend your rib cage a little bit. Because in order to turn my body towards the left, I need to make sure that this lower rib cage is coming back versus me kind of shifting and opening up this side. So in order to really effectively turn into the left side, I need to make sure that my obliques can kick on, or I have this shape of the rib cage that allows for the obliques to work, which is a little bit more of the side bending position. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay on my left side with the ab mat underneath the lower part of my rib cage. I'm then going to have my left foot against the wall with the knee slightly bent, and I'm going to have my right foot above my hip level and up on the wall, and these feet should be relatively stacked on top of each other, okay? Now, I'm going to support my head. If you don't have enough external rotation of the shoulder, like you feel like it's uncomfortable, you could put something underneath your head. And what I'm going to think about doing is the entire time, I'm going to press a little bit of pressure through my left foot, the inside edge of my left foot into the wall. Not too much, just a little bit, maybe like a 3 out of 10 pressure the whole time. And for the right foot, I want to make sure my right foot's pointing forward. I don't want to turn it up, or I don't want you to see it turning down excessively, but it's just in line as though you're walking. You're going to press the inside edge of the right foot into the wall, and when you do that, you should feel your glute kick on. If you don't feel your glute kick on, you may have to play with the position of your foot. You may have to bring it forward just a little bit, or you may have to move away from the wall just a little bit more. But a key aspect for this exercise is don't let this knee hyperextend. When I'm pushing into the wall, I should still maintain a slight knee bend. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to inhale as I push my left foot into the wall slightly, 3 out of 10. As I exhale, I'm going to push my right foot into the wall, the inside edge. what you should feel when I push the inside edge of the right foot is my body's being pushed into the ground. It's like the right foot is pushing my left hip and my left rib cage into the ground. And that pressure is going to allow for this internal rotation and the rotation of the pelvis towards its left side. So I'm going to inhale as I press my left foot slightly into the wall. I'm going to exhale as I press my right foot. Every time I'm pushing a little bit more, I'm not just taking my foot off the gas on the left foot. I'm going to keep the gas pedal pressed all the time. And even with the right foot, I'm going to press harder and harder. And every time I push, I should feel my right glute working and maybe some of my right hamstring. So I'm going to inhale, press my left foot, exhale, press my right foot, and I'm going to do 2 sets of 6 breaths, 2-second inhale, 3 to 4 second exhale. If you found this information helpful, comment, subscribe, check out more information on our Instagram at alex.effer, and I'll see you next time.